Yep.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. This is a great panel of the fantastic panelists. It's a subject that is near and dear to what we do at Granger Reis. We are an executive search and advisory company working with some of the top tier miners in the world. The theme is, what does good mining leadership mean in time of geopolitical uncertainty? To my right, to my left, I should say, I have John Stanton, CEO of Weir, Samantha Campbell, General Counsel at Endeavour Mining, Dino, Otranto, CEO of Fortescue Metals, Terry Briggs, Chief Development Officer at AngloGold Ashanti, and Mark Cutifani. We're going to dive right in. How do you define good leadership in mining today, and is that definition changing fast enough to meet geopolitical and environmental challenges? Over to you, Mark, first.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Firstly, great to be here. Thank you for the opportunity. As it's always been, I think foresight is key, and in a rapidly changing world, being able to see maybe not the detail, but where the general trends are going, I think is the key. But also being aware that what you think you see might not be what is really happening. So being open to the possibility, or having a sense of where things are, and being aware of what are the things that would confirm whether that's right, and being flexible. So I think foresight and having the flexibility to adjust as things actually unfold is the starting point. Second point, and something that I don't think in the industry we're as good as we should be, is to understand the basics of the industry. And when I talk about the basics, I'm talking about understanding the nature of the resources you have, the optionality you have, and how you would react to how the market unfolds with those resources. I don't think there's a lot of that type of thinking goes into the operations. And the third point is about relationships, and it's about people. People are the key, and both in terms of intelligence, understanding how you actually lead the organisation, and the connections you make outside the organisation. So putting that whole package together, I think, is the key.
Excellent, thank you. Terry, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I agree with Mark, and I think adaptability and resilience is key, because we're in a continually rapidly changing environment. But if I think about what's important, I think clear and consistent messaging is the key. You're in an environment where we have social media, we have real-time news, and the last thing you want is to have inconsistent messaging as you're dealing with different jurisdictions with different issues and different problems. And if you stick to your sort of set of company values and personal values, I think that'll go a long way.
Thank you. Dino?
Yeah, look, I think there's an element of courage. I think this day and age, it's quite easy for industrial leadership to be a bit of a windsock to the political direction of the day. And as Mark alluded to, having the foresight to think long term and weather the short-term storm in that sense, I think is becoming rarer and rarer these days.
Yeah. Samantha?
So my view is that the definition of leadership can be quite broad and can actually include a variety of different themes within that. And the first one would be something that Mark's mentioned, people, of course, preparing the next generation, preparing the talent pipeline. The second would be technology, looking forward to technology, always having a view to how it can be embraced, how it can be adapted, how it can be used. The third would be something close to what Dino was saying, is knowing what your values are and being constant to your values and embedding those values into an ESG framework, being able to adapt those. And then the last would probably be flexibility, realizing that you have all these different aspects of leadership that you can play on, and then being able to adapt them to the circumstances while always looking forward to the long-term solution. So the definition is quite wide, and it can be what you want, and there will always be, as the circumstances change, different priorities within those different strands of leadership.
Thank you. John?
Yeah, difficult to go last after all my esteemed colleagues on the panel, but I agree with what's been said. For me, I think, what I would boil it down to is I think the industry, collectively has work to do to demonstrate greater stewardship, and within that we are capable of delivering endowment-based outcomes for all of the stakeholders that we all engage with, whether that's investors, our customers, communities, the environment that we're operating in. And I think given the criticality of mining to delivery of everything the world needs over the next few decades, I think there's an opportunity for us collectively in the industry to show more leadership in those kinds of areas. And I think it's critical that we do that. We need to enhance the reputation of mining broadly as an industry, and that's going to require courage and other things that have been talked about in terms of how we do that. And I think a great example of that is water, which is a major issue wherever you go around the world, and we have the benefit of serving the mining industry pretty much everywhere. So we see parts of the world are highly water stressed, parts have too much water, but it's treated as a tactical issue. But it's so important to all of the stakeholders in the industry, and there's an opportunity for all of us to demonstrate real leadership on that, and that we can look after the water on an endowment basis. We're doing that end to end, right from development through to remediation, and particularly with the communities, the environment, nature. We're not doing anything to harm them. In fact, we're doing good. And I think for me, that's the big opportunity for us collectively as the industry.
Thank you. Sticking with you, John, Weir operates across diverse markets. How do you ensure strategic resilience when geopolitical shifts impact both your customers and supply chains?
Yeah, I think it starts with me, and look in the mirror. We serve a cyclical industry, so look in the mirror every morning and tell yourself that. I learned that some of that the hard way, serving the oil and gas industry previously. So, and that means you have to build resilience, and you have to build resilience from the foundations up. So, as an equipment supplier to the industry and technology supplier to the industry, that means, it starts with your business model. And we've created a business where 80% of our revenues come from aftermarket, so spares and support and service. And that means even though, we see CapEx cycles, we see commodity price cycles, a large proportion of our revenues are fairly constant through the cycle because, most of the industry, keeps running whatever happens, so the demand is pretty stable. And then it comes to diversification. So, even though we're just a mining-focused supplier to the industry, we have massive commodity diversification. So our big three would be copper, gold, iron ore. It's probably about 50% of our revenues, but the rest of our revenues are everything else, everywhere, be that diamonds, PGMs, coal, oil sands, nickel, lithium, et cetera, So you've got commodity diversification and geographic diversification as well, which also provide buffers. And then the final point, I would say, as an industrial manufacturer, it's about having resilience in your manufacturing and supply chain. The most important thing we've got to do is keep our customers running. So if you have any issues on that side, that means you stop a mine. That's the worst day you could ever have as a supplier to the industry. So we focused on having regional, vertically integrated manufacturing and supply chain and a network such that if we have an issue somewhere, we can balance production across our network and be able to continue to supply the industry. So it's multiple angles for us, but that's how I think we've created a very resilient business.
Thank you, John. Building on your point about resilience, Mark, how does that compare to the operator challenges you've faced in your career?
I think when people talk about resilience, one of the key points I make in positioning a business for those types of changes is, I thought John's point on business model is really important. If you looked at the big five in terms of the majors, in terms of mining companies, BHP, a mining company, doesn't like to go past concentrate in terms of where it sells its products, so it keeps itself in that area. Rio, a bit the same, although they fancy themselves more as investment bankers as well in terms of picking commodities. Vale, logistics, Glencore trading, and at Anglo we used to talk about mining the value chain. And so the focus we had on mining the value chain is making sure that we were focusing our capital deployment on those points of leverage that we thought were the things that would differentiate us through the cycle. And that helped us with the resilience part. So it was a different type of business model. Mm-hmm. And for me, after we'd given a lot of thought, we thought it was a far more resilient business model. And it also has to be, the second part of that is, when circumstances change, you need to adjust. So I use the example of the contract changes at De Beers. The minute that sort of things happen, you've then got to adjust your business model and align it to that new circumstance. And I think that's an example of being able to move and change with what happens. And I'm not making that as a commentary on whether they did it well or not. I'm just saying that was a material change, that you have to then think differently about your business model.
Excellent. And just sticking with you, Mark, looking back at your leadership at Anglo American, Vale, what qualities do you believe are most critical in mining leaders today? I know we touched on a few of them earlier, but any specific ones?
It helps if you understand the business. And I don't mean that offhanded. I'm actually deadly serious that the one thing that I've found in probably the last 15, 20 years, we've lost some of our skills around mining, geology, mining, and understanding the value, optionality we have available to us in the way we look at the geology and understand how we can develop different mining strategies for different circumstances. And in a market where you have volatile prices, you have a lot more flexibility in your operations through geology and mining to actually take advantage of that price volatility, particularly in metals. Mm-hmm. And so I in all the work we do, we find that people haven't connected the inherent optionality and value that is embedded in the mining and the operating processes to what the market is doing. And so for me, that's the biggest opportunity I see across the industry. And the second part then is people, relationships, and how you connect economic value and optionality with social value. Yep. Because if you can connect those two pieces, then your ability to deliver sustainable results, I think, is better than most in the industry.
Thank you. Just to further connect this with ESG practices, Dino, how does innovation and cultural alignment support these qualities?
So we exist because of disruption in technology, but also really understanding the voice of need of our customer. We found an opportunity and we've leveraged technology and taken some risk. Where does that put us now, 20 years on? The story is actually quite similar, although once you get to the maturation point in an organisation, you kind of lose some of that. You lose the understanding of what the customer needs, and you have a paradigm of 20 years ago, and you think that's the same model. But your customer changes. And what we've learned, particularly in the last year, as we're diversifying our business and certainly becoming more ESG focused, that is not an internal vision we've had. It's just listening to what the customer actually wants. And it's amazing then what network and relationship then can be leveraged to open up so many more doors on innovation, technology, and largely creating a more resilient circular supply chain. And as evident of some of the announcements Fortescue's made over the last year, bringing your customer and your supply chain inherently into your own backyard really does strengthen a market which in our commodity is at a low in the cycle right now.
Yep. Thank you. Samantha, operating in West Africa brings complex legal and regulatory challenges. How do you navigate this uncertainty while supporting operational agility?
So for the context for that question, thank you, Rowan. Endeavour Mining is the largest gold producer in West Africa, and we are just gold and just in West Africa and in Francophone West Africa as well. So our operations are in Côte d'Ivoire, Burkina Faso and Senegal. And there is a perception, indeed, that this is a complex and rapidly evolving regulatory environment. But I would actually say it is actually not that complex. One of the attractive aspects of investing in West Africa is that actually we have a homogenized regional code-based system. And so if you know the system in one country, you can be quite comfortable in another with some variances. So it's not the complexity, but it is the ever-changing nature. And I would say it's not even the ever-changing nature of the law, it's the way it's applied as well, because there is consistency throughout the region. And where which leads to, I would say, an uncertain environment in some cases, with different flavours across each of the jurisdictions. Where we've seen a lot of publicity around this issue is on the changes to the mining code recently, changes to the fiscal regime, the local content regime. And I would say that the best way of being able to navigate through this is being prepared, really knowing the jurisdictions in which you operate. And we do. We know West Africa, and we're able to engage at the time that the laws are being developed through industry bodies, and also after they've been developed, to ensure that we have the right way of approaching this changed legislation. And we are citizens of our host countries, and we do have to adapt to the changing requirements there. And I'll give you one example where I think this indirectly maybe accelerated a resilient aspect of our business is in local content. So the governments have each set forward quite fairly stringent local content, local employment requirements, but we've adapted, and we've even more than adapted. We've taken proactive initiatives to embrace it and to make it work for the business as well. So we've initiated programs of banking finance for suppliers, for example. We've contacted banks, connected banks and suppliers. We've also put forward local content accelerator workshops. And this helps us within the country. It also helps within the very local communities, which can be quite different to the national interests. And it does ensure that we have a resilient supply chain that is in country, and 80%, we procure 80% locally within the region. And there are free movement of goods throughout the region, so we can maximise Côte d'Ivoire, Burkina Faso and Senegal as well. So there are advantages there. So
thank you very much, Samantha. And linking the governance to operational realities, Terry, how does this play out on the ground?
So, you know, we operate in multiple jurisdictions. You know, similar to Endeavour, we're in West Africa, we're in Western Australia, we have operations in the Americas. You know, and when we look at countries, you know, from a sort of business development perspective and new country entry, we have pretty simple criteria. Beyond the geological prospectivity of a region, we equally look at, you know, is it safe for our people to operate? Does it have a stable fiscal regime? And, you know, would a new country entry worsen or improve our portfolio risk profile? I think an excellent example of how we look at jurisdictions is we were fortunate enough to take stewardship of Centamin's assets a year ago. And with that came an operating mine in Egypt, which would be a new jurisdiction for us, and a development project in Côte d'Ivoire. And as a new country entry, bringing the board and other key stakeholders along that journey, we did 3 independent country risk assessments of Egypt. And prior to announcing the transaction, we met with the key minister and other government officials to make sure that, you know, they saw that we would be a good, you know, operator of the asset in their country, and we got to hear from them that they would be welcoming of that. And we did the same with Resolute. We sold the project in Côte d'Ivoire to Resolute not long after because it didn't meet our threshold. for a project development. And they equally undertook their assessments of Côte d'Ivoire, and we made sure they got to meet with the minister and key government officials before taking over. Because it's really important to understand that, you know, going into a new jurisdiction, your record of how you operate in other jurisdictions is going to carry with you. And we're in jurisdictions as varying as Western Australia to Guinea and Tanzania. And how you apply that, your record will stand.
Thanks, Terry. Dino, over to you. Fortescue's global decarbonisation strategy often intersects with shifting geopolitical priorities. How do you lead teams to stay focused and innovative when the global landscape keeps changing?
Look, internal, it's not that big a drama for us. We have a pretty charismatic chairman who has built an organisation really by rallying the troops. So, you know, we benefit by extremely low turnover. We have very cause-driven folks, 20,000 people who love getting their hands dirty, ripping things apart, trying new things and taking risk. It's a privilege to actually have walked into that. External though, I think it's probably more the rub that you get, particularly now as we're moving our organisation into offering services and technologies to other people. And I'm learning, having to try and sell my wares, first time I've ever tried to do that in my career, meeting those types of questions about tariffs and geopolitics, and it's. But I think what leads progress is ultimately costs of energy.
Yep.
I think that's a unifying factor everywhere, particularly now with hyperscalers and the demand going through the roof. And importantly, what China has been able to do is get the cost of the tech to create that energy to a point now where firm green energy around the clock is economic. And what I've seen over my career is every process or every mine that I've ever been part of has only ever been enabled by a low cost of electricity. And it's largely been connected to a coal mine or a hydro dam, or in Mozambique working at a smelter connected to the Kariba low-cost green electricity. Now we're on the cusp of, I think, a mass decentralisation of low-cost energy, which I'm very hopeful as a processing person, you can unlock these sovereign contained ore bodies and bring wealth distribution to many more people who haven't had access to it in the past.
Thank you. And just expanding on innovation, John, how do you keep your global teams aligned?
Well, it's a big job because we have 12,000 people around the world, but they're spread over more than 50 countries, and you know, in the mining markets that we serve around the world. And we want to have local people in those markets who, you know, shoulder to shoulder with our customers, you know, in the mines, day in, day out, you know, doing what we need to do to keep our customers running. So you want to sort of have that local capability, but it's really important to us as an organisation to have the sort of culture and the overall vision and purpose that connects all of those people, and they feel that they're part of something bigger, you know, that we're on a mission, you know, to enable the mining industry to you know, become more efficient, become more sustainable, deliver the critical minerals and metals that are required for the future of the world. And if you can, you know, the knack of sort of deploying authentic leadership, purpose, giving people meaningful work to do. So, you know, we're quite a decentralized organization. We want our people to be decision makers and not have to refer back up to head office to make a call on something. That's really, really important. So having a vision and a purpose and creating really meaningful work for your people all over the world, so they feel that they are doing something that has real value. So we treat our culture as an asset, because I view it as it's like any tangible asset almost. If you don't invest in that asset, then it will depreciate and become inefficient over time. So you have to just invest as much in your people and your culture. And part of my job is to be the ringleader of all of that and keep it going.
Thank you. Terry, you mentioned earlier, the fantastic acquisition of Sentiment last year. How do you tend to evaluate and mitigate geopolitical risk when pursuing new business development opportunities for AngloGold Ashanti?
Yeah, I mean, Rowan, I think one of the important things is that when we look at opportunities, they're not short term. Like, we're not looking to get in and get out quickly. You know, one of the things we've been doing recently is we made a significant discovery in Nevada, and we've since consolidated our ownership around there with the acquisitions of Corvus, Core Sterling, and a few weeks ago Augusta. And so we're making significant investment around discovery, but we saw Nevada as a good jurisdiction to be in, but the same could go for other jurisdictions, and you're there for a long time. So you're going to see successive different administrations, you're going to see politics change, you're going to see communities embrace you, hopefully as a good steward and operator in their community. So it's just really important to be going eyes wide open that, you know, if you're looking at an opportunity or investing, and in some cases considerable sums to either develop a project or make an acquisition, that it's a jurisdiction that you're going to want to be in for a long term. You know, we've been operating in Ghana for many decades now, and we see equally in Nevada, we see a multi-generational opportunity. So, you know, it's taking that short term, you know, what is the current position, but also, you know, what's this jurisdiction going to be like over the long term, and it's a place to deploy capital and invest.
Interesting. And just to transition from risk to governance, Samantha, what kind of frameworks support that?
Yeah, I agree completely with everything that Terry said, and indeed it echoes the approach that Endeavour would take. In our case, we're looking at we're approaching the finalisation of our DFS for an Assafu project in Côte d'Ivoire, which could become one of our next flagship projects. And in doing that, we're very much looking at what we can bring to the community. So we do discuss at national level with the government, and we have our meetings with ministers and national level decision makers. But we also take a very deep and considered view of the community and the way that community will develop over time. Yep. In terms of doing that, we have started to take a slightly different approach, in as much as the dialogue was always very much with the village chiefs, and we used to very much involve the women. So it was all to do with our purpose, which is to deliver gold, to produce gold that delivers meaningful value to society and people. So that's our purpose, to go to John's view, but to what John was saying. But the way we're doing that now is a far deeper engagement with our local communities, who are quite different to the people we deal with at national level. Yep. And it's really important to go beyond what the law requires in terms of duty to consult and so on, and to really listen to what they're saying about what their requirements are, and not to listen to just one group. We are really engaging more and more with the youth, because we're finding that the youth in these communities are getting a much, much louder voice, and we have to engage with a view to the future, and they are the ones that we're listening to. So that is a slight change of profile.
Excellent.
To our
Thank
approach.
you. Moving on further to the ESG thematic, Mark, how did you approach ESG integration in geopolitically sensitive regions, and what lessons can current leaders draw from that?
First thing I said was ban the use of the term ESG. I think it's too narrow, and it doesn't cover the concept of sustainability, in my view, appropriately. And so we changed the conversation in the organisation, and the important thing was we also then connected that conversation with economic returns. So when an American or a US-based investor said, "What's this ESG crap?" we took them to the sustainability conversation, and I said, sustainability is an economic concept. 10% free cash flow after investing in replacement of resources, mine development and sustaining capital puts you in the top quartile of performers in our industry in terms of returns to shareholders. And if you can connect that with a 15% return on capital employed, you will generally deliver somewhere around 15% growth, annual growth, through the price cycle in our business. We then unpacked sustainability in 7 lumps. Safety. In 2007, we killed 70 people at Anglo American in the course of doing work. If we'd have continued that performance from 2007, there would be no Anglo American, or wouldn't have been any Anglo American for us to work with some years ago. We go through environment, talk about Macondo or tailings dam spills, what did that cost companies? And when you unpack the social contract and what it costs for someone to be picketing at the gate, you've got to be able to demonstrate to shareholders the cost of not getting the social contract right. And then there's leadership, the leadership pipeline you go through, being on the bottom half of the cost curve and ultimately the balance sheet. It's that full story that the organisation has to understand in terms of delivery and outcome. And I gave one example to a US shareholder on what that approach was worth. In year 5 of the time we were at Anglo American, we had foreign exchange control in South Africa that wouldn't allow us to move cash outside of South Africa from operations, and they were our best returning operations. At the end of year 5, and we had the discussion when I first started about removing foreign exchange controls, they said, no way in the world, you moved to London, you ran away from the country, you'll pay the price. Yep. At the end of year 5, they've said, you've made a 90% reduction in fatal incidents across the group. You've invested in local communities, the environmental work you've done, and the way you've connected with us as South Africans in a respectful, appropriate way. We've decided to remove foreign exchange controls from your group. That was a $10 billion decision in terms of our share price, and we ended up outranking BHP, Rio and others in terms of our financial metrics as a consequence. That's what getting the social contract means.
Thank you, Mark. And just connecting the ESG to governments, Samantha, any further thoughts on that?
So we would tend to view community relations, so talking about the narrowness of the definition of ESG, we would view community relations, ESG, artisanal mining, all within the framework of the group that deals with ESG or sustainability, and that's overseen by our ESG board committee. So it's a very holistic approach to all those issues together within the nation. And it's something that, for us, just simply to echo what you're saying, Mark, it just makes good business sense. As well as being the right thing to do, it makes good business sense.
Yeah, thank you. John, how is Weir leveraging innovation to help customers achieve productivity and ESG objectives while addressing stakeholder expectations and navigating geopolitical pressures?
Yeah, so I mean, I would actually link it to sustainability and then go to talk about technology, because I think what Weir is like a 150-year-old company. It's the very definition of sustainability, and to what Dino said, it's all about the cost of energy. We've been at the forefront of multiple energy revolutions over the years, be that helping to build steamships on the Clyde, in the late 19th century, the development of oil in Persia and so on and so forth, through to fracking in the US. So we've been at the forefront of these new technologies over the years. So it's kind of inherent within our business model. So the way we think about it is we boil down, we did a lot of work on strategic marketing, voice of the customers. You collectively put that together. What do our customers want from us as the engineer and the technology provider? Well, it's really simple. They want us to help them move less rock, use less energy, use water wisely, create less waste, and use digital capability to really boost and turbocharge what we can do in terms of hardware. So that's that, and then those 5 things just now drive our technology and innovation roadmap. So we've built an enterprise technology roadmap which sort of spans multiple time horizons. We cut it into Horizon 1, Horizon 2, Horizon 3, which includes sort of the basic development of the core products and how you apply new technologies to those in Horizon 1, right through to Horizon 3, which is, blue sky scanning to see what are the disruptive technologies that are emerging. And we sort of use AI models to scan, what patents are being issued around the world, what's coming out in terms of academic research papers. Where is VC money going? That's always a good indicator of where, where there might be interesting things happening. And then we kind of have the ability to sort of turn that into what are the big signals and shifts that we see coming in the long term, and then go look at that and figure out whether there's anything that's relevant for our technology roadmap. So it's fundamental in our DNA. It's truly driven today by voice of customer, and challenging that sometimes as well, because sometimes we think customers don't always know the right questions to ask. But it's important that we're bold as a supplier, and we do challenge where appropriate, and try and build technology, both hardware and equipment, but increasingly now software and embedded AI to help drive what we think is you can have a win-win solution here where you can drive cost reduction and productivity, and because you're using less energy and water, it's delivering you a better sustainability outcome as well.
Thank you. We're going to do 2 final quick questions, and then if the audience has a question, we'd be happy to take one. The next question, Dino, you've championed First Nations leadership. What practical steps can the industry take to build inclusive pipelines that strengthen leadership resilience?
Yeah, I might just start by I was reflecting on Mark's comment about dropping the term ESG at Anglo. We don't use that term either, but it wasn't by design. And I think linking to what you're saying, John, it's actually core of what we do as a business, right? And I've had the same Yank audience talk about what's this ESG crap, and it's quite an interesting question because you just talk to the fundamentals of your existence, and ESG thematic is actually implied in that. And it's the same with First Nations employment. So I've had the luxury of living all over the world and dealing with First Nations communities. One of the things, the regret that I have is often in these countries, even with regulation that employs certain local employment ratios, what you do see, and it was the same at Fortescue up until very recently, our First Nations contingent is often the highest tenure, so they've been there the longest, but have always ever been in the first role that they've ever started. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a real indictment on us as mining leaders, is people in the communities want to see leaders of their community in the organisation. And what we do is somewhat push that agenda. So and again, people will term this as it's a diversity agenda, but unless you're giving real experience and real development opportunities to First Nations employees, you'll never get there.
Yeah.
And once you do, it comes back to the ESG agenda, because everything else, permitting, license to operate, water access, all of a sudden becomes a lot easier. And that's really one of the core reasons why Fortescue has existed. We have 7 First Nations communities that we do business with. We're deploying over $6 billion now in commercial enterprise to those communities, which on a relative perspective for Canada or Africa, populations in Australia are much, much smaller of these communities. That's an amazing result. And the spin-off benefit it gives for organisations to continue to have their licence to operate and generate wealth for the shareholder and the community is just phenomenal to see.
Fantastic. Thank you, Dino. Terry, last question. What does effective stakeholder engagement look like in jurisdictions where mining is both an economic driver and also a political issue?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, our purpose is mining to empower people and advance communities. And it gets to that. It doesn't matter if it's the politics of a West African nation or Western Australia. Kind of similar theme to the others and what Dino was saying. I mean, we equally at Sunrise Dam very early in its days worked with an Indigenous mining contractor that has gone on to be successful and work at other operations. It's anti-malarial campaigns at Obuasi to ensure the safety of the community and others we live in. So it's realising that you're not only working at a country level, but you're also working at a very local level to sort of better the communities and leave them better than when you first got in there.
Excellent, thank you. Andrew, do we have any time for a question?
We've got time for like one quick question. If someone's got a very quick question, you can just ask it. Okay.
Richard Morgan from Kroll, formerly Anglo-American, and also the Critical Minerals Africa Group. Geopolitical uncertainty often means something wider than just country level and community level, i.e. China versus the West. Does the fact that none of you really explored or developed that suggest that the job of the company is just to keep your head down and get on with it quietly as best you can?
Any of you like to take that question?
I'll kick it off for Mark.
Oh.
Yeah, look, I get this question a lot, and I think my lived experience is that the trade flows are already so complex and convoluted that trying to take a binary position, it's almost like taking something out of a spaghetti pot and the whole thing just comes with you, and then very quickly people realise this is a little bit too difficult. Let's back it off, right? And that was evident to me in a US manufacturing facility where it was proud Union and US steel, and there comes a Chinese steel ingot right in front of me that is going into a big American truck. I said, well, how's tariffs going to change this? And then the whole conversation started to shift. So I've always maintained we don't get overawed by the positioning that's going on. I think the business community has done an extraordinary job of piercing through that complexity to continue to generate wealth across the globe. I can't see it changing.
I think in terms of leadership, we're improving, but we're still a long way from where we need to be in talking about our industry. One, demonstrating from a performance point of view, how do we reduce footprints, and everybody's touched on that. But the second point is leaders getting up and talking about how important our industry is for the world. Most people don't know we have the most significantly net positive environmental footprint on the face of the planet. And the fact that people don't know that is an indictment on us as leaders. We've got to get off our asses and start talking to the industry and not leave it to Rowatish Darwan to do the hard work. It's up to the leaders of the industry to do the leadership and actually talk to the industry and provide leadership right out there, because we're not doing enough.
And I think on that note, we need to go and get off our backsides and not leave it all to Row. Can we have a round of applause for a fabulous panel, and a special round of applause for Rowan for putting together such an amazing lineup?